Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, July 14th, 2025. Ryan Dawson will be here in just a moment. Here he is from South Korea to talk to us about the nature and extent of his research, which is extraordinary and second to none on the issue of the Epstein files. Ryan, it's a pleasure. I know it's the middle of the night and it's already tomorrow where you are. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, thank you. This is kind of cathartic for me because I started research before somebody wrote this fine book. You might know him.
Oh, you're very kind. You're very kind. Thank you for having it. Thank you for reading it. We've admired each other's work for a long time. Give us the big picture here before we get into the latest raging dispute over here in the States about the Justice Department's absurd contention that the client list doesn't exist. Give us the big picture. Who was Epstein? How did he make his money? And what went on that island?
Well, it's islands, plural, actually. So a lot of people, they know about Little St. Jeffries. He also bought Greater St. Jeffries. And so that is, every time I hear the island, people need to understand that the activity that went on those islands also happened in Florida and New York and New Mexico and Ohio and in Paris. He had properties all over the place. And the pedophilia and other acts and trafficking happened in all those locations. And that started long before he had his islands. And it also happened on St. Thomas. He had an office in St. Thomas and he had half the government there working for him.
Wow. What was his source of wealth? How is it that he had a home in Paris and New York City and that he literally owned these islands?
In the beginning, it was mostly Les Wexner. I can give you a background on him too. Les Wexner. Everybody, by the way, who cares? I mean, sweetheart deal aside, you can still boycott Victoria's Secret. You can boycott Seagram's Liquor. You can at least avoid the products of the people involved in this. Plus, they're prominent Zionists that support genocide and shooting babies anyway. So that's enough reason. In league with Jeffrey Epstein. He got a lot of money principally from, I'd say his top three. Well, obviously Wexner and Bronfman, and then Leon Black, and then Glenn Dubin. That was his principal financing. And then a lot of it he got illegally. And his companies, he was able to get huge tax breaks for example, in the Virgin Islands, $300 million in tax breaks simply by bribing or blackmailing, we don't know which one, but using his skills to get the legislators to change the rules for him.
Wow. And what occurred on these islands, without getting too graphic, it is sex with underage women, and women brought there underage for the purpose of engaging in acts of prostitution. The latter defined under federal statute as sex trafficking. This is what P. Diddy was just tried for and acquitted.
Well, P. Diddy's going to get nailed in the civil suits, but it did have underage, we can call it prostitution. I would just call it rape because you can't consent if you're underage. But there was also prostitution. There were plenty of girls who were barely of age. It was a mixture. When you're targeting people, not everybody's into kids. So you got to use whatever bait they had. But he had a lot of girls, over 250. I would pose a question to you. How much money do you think was paid out in lawsuits related to Jeffrey Epstein?
Well, I saw a number because you told us about it involving J.P. Morgan Chase that I believe approached $300 million. Now, I was stunned when I saw that. Do I have that number right?
So that's a big chunk of it. $290 million from one of the lawsuits from J.P. Morgan Chase. They also had to pay out, ends up being about 105 plus another 30 million cash when to sell off the properties on the islands. But no, the total is 800 million, 807,800,000 when you combine them all, because Deutsche Bank had to pay 75 million. JP Morgan had to pay another 75 million. It's different lawsuits. That was to the Virgin Islands. The 290 was to Epstein's victims. You're talking about 250 girls just in that.
Wow.
Another 150 in Deutsche Bank.
What was the culpability of Deutsche Bank and J.P. Morgan? Why did they have to cough up all those millions?
Yeah, so they facilitated the revenue needed for him when they knew or should have known better, the judge thought, of what he was doing. They were paying hush money. He was taking out, if you get 900, if you get like $9,999 out enough times, that's a red flag, even if it doesn't go over the $10,000 threshold. Sort of how they nailed Dennis Hastert, but it was more than that. I mean, J.P. Morgan was involved with white collar crimes with Jeffrey Epstein anyway. It's why Jeffrey Epstein got released from Bear Stearns, was breaking regulations. He set up something called liquid funding and another Bear Stearns Ireland to try to get around regulations. And all they were doing is they were dumping assets onto a subsidiary and then getting the rating agencies to come look at without their toxic assets temporarily at the end of the month and then buy them back again. It's not a very clever Ponzi scheme.
But there's no question but that these banks, two of the largest banks in the world, JP Morgan Chase might be the biggest bank in the United States, were aware of what was going on.
Absolutely. And JP Morgan was involved in that Bear Stearns scandal too. They put up 1.2 billion in that. They absolutely knew. One of their executives, Jess Staley, was deeply involved, and we know because we have internal emails between him and Jeffrey talking about Disney princesses and things like that. He absolutely knew what Jeff was doing because he was part of it, and he's being sued by JP Morgan too.
Is there a client list of the males who patronized the islands or used his services to have these illicit sexual unions?
To quote Pam Bondi, I have that on my desk, but officially, no, there isn't. Why would you have such a thing? Why would you write down all of your Johns in a notebook and like leave it in a locker or something? Of course, there's no client list, as in like somebody alphabetized and just wrote down who in organized crime would ever write down everybody they're involved in some malicious crime. But there's no list like that. But there is a list that you can make and that the FBI should have made. But what happened online was, I think it was Nick Bryant or somebody, they released some of the flight logs and the little black book, which is actually Maxwell's black book. And there's a lot of names on those, but that is not enough data to accuse somebody of rape. Just because they flew on a plane with somebody, that is a data point. It's not useless, but that's not enough. And being in the black book, that's just anybody they ever knew at all. And, many people they knew obviously didn't know what they were doing and were not involved with them in that. But you could make a client list by listening to the victims themselves, listening to Epstein's own employees, his pilots, his chauffeurs, his bodyguards, his chefs, and they have. And this is in part of the record, it's part of the court record where these people have stated what they saw, and the women, or at the time girls, who were victims have said who they were trafficked to. And it's corroborated. And you also have in the financial crimes, his former partner at Tower Financial, Stephen Hoffenberg, when he was let out of jail, started blowing the whistle left and right, said he was Mossad, So that's how you get the list, is by listening to the women. They're still alive, a lot of them, and they'll tell you what happened to them and who they were trafficked to. And it wasn't just Jeffrey and Maxwell and Prince Andrew. But I find it hilarious them to say there aren't any clients. They're like, well, no, you have to admit that Prince Andrew and Glenn Maxwell are, because Glenn Maxwell's in jail and Prince Andrew had to pay out $16 million, and he's photographed with Virginia Roberts in Maxwell's house in the UK. Like, why? The thing is, like, why do these people even know all these teenage girls at all? Like, what else were you doing?
Right. Did Judge Loretta Preska, who had, I guess, one of the large civil cases, didn't she, a federal district court judge in Brooklyn, New York, order the publication of these lists of which you're speaking?
Yeah, but they're putting the cart before the horse or the horse before the cart. They don't know. They're just assuming there was a list. There never was a list. They had some flight logs and a black book. That's not a list. The way to compile the list would be to go and talk to all the victims and do like real detective work and find out, okay, can we corroborate this person's story? Because girls can lie too. But it turns out, I don't think all these people were only trafficked to Maxwell and Jeffrey. And these lawsuits have already been paid $807 million anyway. And so they know all these Jane Does, they will tell you, and some of them have. I don't know if you want to get into names, whatever, but these have already been said, like Virginia Roberts, rest in peace. But she told us who she was trafficked to.
Right.
And her story does pan out. She knew. You can ask them things like, okay, what did the bathroom look like? What was the decor? Like if they've been in that person's house or they've been in a hotel together, and it pans out. And
I'm going to play a montage for you. You have probably seen all of these clips, but I would like you to comment on them. This is a little bit more than a minute or so. Chris, cut number 9.
How is it that my father can be convicted of 34 crimes, but no one on Epstein's list has even been brought to light? I'm trying to figure out how that's possible, right, folks? It's almost like they're trying to protect those pedophiles for some reason. I can't imagine why, right?
Why is the FBI protecting the greatest pederast, the largest scale pederast in human history?
Simple, because of who's on that list.
Everybody in politics has a vice that's much worse than alcoholism, is the way that I put it. But we
release the list.
Seriously, we need to release the Epstein list. That is an important thing.
The DOJ may be releasing the list of Jeffrey Epstein's clients. Will that really happen?
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump.
In this case, in Epstein's case, it is incredibly disturbing. We have flight logs, we have information, names that will come out.
I'm not ever going to let this story go because of what I heard from a source about Bill Clinton on a plane with Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not letting it go ever. Ever.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep? That is unbelievable.
Let's go to the Attorney General. Did she fail to prosecute Epstein and others for crimes committed under her jurisdiction when she was the Attorney General of the state of Florida?
She did. Well, it's hard to know how much her arm was twisted. Everybody except for Donald Jr., I guess, in those clips, when they were asked, what's important to you? What did they say? Their relationship with Israel. That's all they care about. They probably looked at the list, found out it went back to Israel, and that was it. The list was gone. And the list was gone the day Netanyahu came to visit again. He said, get rid of it.
What is the connection to Israel? Was Epstein a Mossad asset?
1,000% he was. First off, Epstein did not create this compromise ring. He walked into a pre-existing nexus. They've been doing this. And if anybody's like, oh, our greatest ally, would Israel really run an operation that included child rape? Israel shoots children. Israel shoots people in line begging for food. And Israel is the go-to haven for pedophile refugees. They all know if you get caught, you can flee to Israel and get away with it. Back in 2000, the vice counsel for Israel was in Brazil. His name's Ari Shur. And he got caught in a pedophile ring with little kids, like 8, 9 years old, with this guy named George Steinberg, who was a Hebrew language teacher. He already's in jail, so we can say all this. Well, what happened was a 17-year-old saw herself nude that George had posted on the internet. And how many pictures do you have to put out there before one of the girls sees themselves? And that's what brought him down, and they raided his property, and they found just trunkets of photos and CDs and all. This is CDs. That's how long ago that was.
But back to Epstein, Ryan. What was he entrapping people for? Israel's political purposes? Was he a paid Mossad agent? Was he passing small talk that he had with whomever? You mentioned Bill Clinton, Bill Richardson, who's now dead. Was he passing that information on to his Israeli superiors?
Israel has everything he had. It wasn't just, they were supposed to be spying on U.S. science and tech and stealing trade secrets, and they did. The compromat was part of that operation, but Epstein was a money launderer. But it wasn't like he was good at making genius scams. He would just use blackmail on tax collectors and legislators and get the rules changed. That was his magic power, which we know because he did it for himself.
What was Attorney General Bondi referring to when she told Fox News the list was on her desk?
I don't think she had looked at it. I think the intel, they all assumed there was a list because online, like in the Twitter sphere, everyone talks about the list. I mean, some of these people talk about tunnels and a bunch of ridiculous stuff. There never was a list. The only list is the list I made. There's no real list. I mean, Maxwell would have a lot of it. And a lot of people in that black book are guilty, but a lot of people are not. You can only make the list by going to the victims. So she said it's there for review. So apparently they hadn't reviewed it. I don't know why why even bring it up again if you're going to rug pull like this? Because that thing was dead under the Biden administration. This all happened in Trump's first term. And his son made a mistake when he said, nobody's been arrested. 4 people were arrested. 3 of them are dead. Jean-Luc Brunel was arrested, and he apparently killed himself all by himself in a jail in Paris. And this guy was instrumental. That's how I first got onto Epstein, was following Jean-Luc Brunel. There was even a 60 Minutes piece about him probably 30 years ago. He was a modeling agent who he owned and worked. First, he started at Karen Models, which was straight out of Tel Aviv, and got in a little trouble. They renamed it MC Squared, and then he opened offices in America. And this is somebody that trafficked women to Epstein, and Epstein trafficked women to him. And he was arrested, and he did go to jail. And this person is part of this Mossad nexus. Now, you asked me earlier, like, well, how do we know he was the Mossad? And a lot of people will point to, well, Acosta said this and that. People said that Acosta said that I was told to back off, that he's intelligence.
Now, Acosta is the former U.S. attorney in Florida who prosecuted, I say in quotes, it really went nowhere.
Yeah.
Epstein, who became the Secretary of Labor in Trump's first term. Do I have that correct?
That's true. And so it is said that he said, I was told to back off. This guy is intelligence and above my pay grade. I don't think the U.S. is spying on the U.S. You don't need trade secrets that you already developed. It's the Israelis that were spying on the U.S.
Does Benjamin Netanyahu fear the revelation of a list of Epstein's clients?
Well, yeah, Epstein knew 4 Israeli prime ministers. He knew Perez, he knew Ehud Barak, he knew Ehud Olmert, and he also knew Moshe Katsav, the president of Israel, and he knew Netanyahu. Moshe Katsav got convicted of rape in Israel, an Israeli president. He was the president when Ehud Barak was the prime minister. And Ehud Barak is witnessed outside of Jeffrey's rape mansion in New York, going in as a bunch of little kids are going in there with him. And he denies, I never saw him with the girls. He's a liar.
Wow.
And he was financed by Wexner and Bronfman as well. See, Les Wexner had something called the Wexner Foundation, and Jeffrey Epstein was put on the board of trustees of the foundation. And through the Israelis too, the same, it's like the reverse of what happens in America. There's a lot of Jewish diaspora that donate to candidates in Israel who don't live in Israel. And they do it through like advertising funds, and there's the same workarounds that happen in America. And through this security firm called Reporty, which got renamed to Carbine, millions of dollars went to Ehud Barak's campaign from the Wexner Foundation. He also got a lot of money from Charles Bronfman of Seagram's Liquor fame that's tied to John McCain and the Lincoln Project. People can pause that later. And Charles Bronfman got a little finger waving for that. But this is the head of the they've changed the name, but at the time it was the United Jewish Appeal. The mirror to that was the United Israel Appeal, and that was set up by a Haganah terrorist, Abba Hillel Silver, and Ted Kulik was part of that too. These are the people that were illegally smuggling weapons to early Israel, including highly enriched uranium. But so but that was out of the Jewish Agency. Now, the very first president of the Wexner Foundation that Wexner co-set that up with was Rabbi Herbert Friedman, who was also on the UJA, hardcore Zionist with a Haganah terrorist. So Wexner has for many decades been involved with Zionist projects. And so financing Barak and Epstein is nothing for him. He is part of a group that he co-created called the Mega Group, full of these donors, which is really just the second generation from the Sonborn Institute that was set up by Rudolf Sonborn and David Ben-Gurion.
When you went through these files, how did you get the files, by the way? Is this public information?
I'd say 90% of it is. I got some things straight from victims, but I guess people, I don't know. You can look at the court cases. You can look at, J.P. Morgan versus Jane Doe, and just read them.
Right.
You can look at, Virginia Giuffre's testimony, Maria Farmer, who's watching right now, by the way. Shout out to Maria and every other victim. We're trying to get some closure here. They will tell you, and they also told in the cases what had happened to them. It's just people are waiting for someone on TV to summarize it for them, and I promise you that's never, ever going to happen. I have a list right here. There's over a dozen billionaires with a B on that list, and I know that I don't have the whole list. This is just what I can prove.
Are there any people on that list who are current public officials in the United States?
Yes, but they mostly did not blackmail politicians. They blackmailed the donor class, because if you have the donor class, you have everybody under them. So you don't really need a low-level congressman or senator when you have, can I say the names? I don't know. When you have the richest people in the world, you control everything. So, they already run most of Congress through AIPAC. So they don't really need that. But by having the donor class, you get to really peel into science and technology. You can have them donate on your behalf, like he had Bill Gates donating through Joedo to MIT, because a lot of research grants go through universities that work with private companies, like the Microwire case, for example. And I talked to their lawyer, John Anasio, about that. They get all the R&D and all the trade secrets go straight to Israel, because if you can, plop in a big donation to the university, they're more than willing to leak that information to you. Wow. And that's the kind of things that was happening.
Ryan, your research and analytical skills are extraordinary, as is your personal courage. Thank you for discussing this with us. We may want to.
Can I add something? I really, really want people to know this. There are two ongoing lawsuits right now. One's being appealed and one is going. Stacy Plaskett is not off the hook. And in that lawsuit, it states, it's talking about human trafficking and co-conspirators and stuff. And so we cannot allow this to get dismissed. She didn't get roped in with the sweetheart deal because she made the mistake of going to New York and soliciting funds, which made it part of the Southern District of New York's jurisdiction in there. And this was brought about by Denise George, the Attorney General of the Virgin Islands, who was fired by the governor for doing that. And I'd have to come back on and explain, like in Virgin Islands, like half of them were on Epstein's payroll, but that is an ongoing lawsuit that could unravel everything, because Trump has hung him up. They said there's not one client. There are so many, and people are thinking Maxwell's going to come and tell the truth. I wouldn't hold my breath on her saying anything but lies, but this lawsuit could do the whole thing in. And the day Denise George did that lawsuit, like the following day, actually, is when they went after a couple influencers called the Tate brothers, and anything you Googled about human trafficking went to that instead of to Epstein.
We'll come back to you again, Ryan. Thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Thank you so much.
Of course. Wow. Coming up tomorrow, Tuesday at 8 a.m, Ambassador Charles Freeman. At 10 a.m, Professor Gilbert Doctorow. At 11 a.m, Aaron Mate. At 1 p.m, Professor Glenn Deason. At 3 p.m, Professor John Mearsheimer. At 4 p.m, Max Blumenthal. Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.